hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everybody, depending on the part of the globe you are in while connecting with us. And welcome to our guests. I'm kind of rushing because I know I'm late. We started fashionably late. So maybe I should say welcome to the CDI TV episode on AI and the Bullshittification of Work. This is the Center for Digital Inquiry at the University of Warwick, and today we have quite a nice crowd, quite a colorful lineup. Let me start with Francesca Coyne from the University of Parma. Francesca's book, The Great Resignation, was published in Italian 3 years ago and has now been translated in English. So go and get it. Bloomsbury 2025, The Great Resignation. Francesca has been studying the world of work and the political, material and cultural condition in which work unfolds. And this very much resonates also with the work of Nick Lawrence from English and Comparative Literature Department here at Warwick. And Nick, amongst other things, is also looking at how work and work struggles, work conflicts are represented and reflected, diffracted in literature, in contemporary literature. And talking about literature, our very own Cecilia Guidotti from the University of Warwick has been studied actually. There's an article out. We're all waiting for the book. But she studied for number 2 of 2 PhDs, just saying, this is the level of my guests. So, she studied how creative writers, or creative writers aspirants, we should say, navigated the world of the creative industry, especially publishing. So we have what I think it's a great trio. I've also studied some creative work, but yes,
quite a lot.
But
you seem to forget that.
Yeah, I seem to forget. Yeah, because I just love
you
being
like
the
your
host.
host.
Yeah, I love being the
Bring
host.
a bit of a score.
I love it so much. You know, this is what I wanted to do since I was a kid. But I think I looked mostly at the meaning that work has for creative workers, and especially at how they would. How work has become, especially in the creative industries, a means through which to express one's own political and ethical values. So I also want to say that here in the embodied audience that we have, I don't like the word audience, should I say embodied friends, supporters, allies, comrades, yeah, of course, our embodied comrades. There's quite a few amongst you that studied work from different perspectives. So I hope that this conversation can become as collective as possible. Workers of this room unite. And of course, we also welcome comments from our disembodied but not less important audience. Now, shall we start with Francesca? Francesca, why this title? I was just so happy that I could write bullshittification or shittification on the upside of an event. I felt a bit like those kindergarten kids that are happy that they can swear, you know. So. What is a bullshit job? What is happening? Is everything shittificating?
Yeah, well, the short
yes.
answer could be yes.
Yes, okay. Cheers to that.
Well, we decided this together because we were trying to figure out how to talk about labor today, and we had 2 words in our head: shittification and bullshittification, and we figured we'll pull them together and see actually what they have in common. And so I'm following Cecilia's tip on this, and I'm giving the definitions, which is, something that probably helps at the beginning of this conversation. And I'll start with bullshit jobs. That was obviously David Graeber back in 1980. yeah, certainly 2018, but he suggested that some jobs are inherently bullshit, and he considered especially work in the third sector, in the world of insurance, the insurance sectors, new jobs, let's say, consultancy that have no meaning for the people that perform there, and he, I mean, I'm just going to say the things that stood out for me in that book, because what I loved about it is that he thought about the wound of spending most of your life doing something that you think is utterly useless for yourself and society. And then, I mean, after the publication of that book, there were several critiques. We're not going to go there, I think it doesn't matter, but what was interesting about it is that bullshit for him was intrinsic to certain jobs, whereas the idea, Cory Doctorow's idea of enshittification starts from platforms and how platforms hook and capture, well, we could say audiences because they provide a certain service that at the beginning is worthwhile, but then when you're trapped as a consumer, let's say, then that value begins to deteriorate. And so what he said we're experiencing is the enshittification of everything that is within the world of platforms. So I think our goal was to try and figure out together whether work, not only in consulting, not only in insurance and banks and the financial sector, not only in platform, is itself becoming more so enshittified, to put it that way, or more so bullshit. And one way of looking at it could be that even academic work, even work in healthcare, is becoming so much quantified, so much measured, so much sort of obsessed with KPI, key performance indicator, that at some point you just perform, and the meaning of it kind of gets lost. And probably this is one of the reasons why work is such a heartfelt topic in people's lives. Why we have such a hard time with work nowadays. So this is just the introduction.
And just to have sort of a initial response from Unique, from your study, from what you have been looking at in the literary field, does work emerge as this shittified or inherently shitty space or dimension of life?
Yeah, so I think a distinction has to be made between what has commonly been used to describe crappy jobs.
Yeah.
So maybe we can use these terms of art, crappy and shittified and bullshitified.
Yeah,
as
I like the
distinct levels of meaning.
coprophology of all of
there's
these.
There's a whole kind of architecture we could draw on here. But
Scatologic.
it's not just the crappiness of the job. I take it that what Graeber was really getting at was the way in which bullshit jobs complete the subsumption of use value by exchange value. They only exist because there's a container for them to exist. So if you're a consultant, you are there as part of a corporate network in which the provision of these ersatz services that are, ostensibly designed to improve the bottom line for the companies that employ them, it doesn't even matter if they do or don't. They're not verifiable in so many cases. They exist as part of a landscape, and that landscape needs populating, and it needs populating with people who carry out these functions. So use value is not even an issue. It's not even on the radar when it comes to bullshit jobs. And it has an interesting kind of resonance with the way that we talk about AI, because AI, you use Harry Frankfurt, the philosopher's distinction, there's truth, there's lies, and then there's bullshit. AI is in that post-truth space where there is no way of really telling where it's getting its results. There's no way in which it's actually having a contributory role in the pursuit of truth, that quaint and antique phrase, which we will all go down with. Instead, it is part of the landscape of bullshit where that distinction doesn't really matter. So in shittification, bullshittification, I think, do have a kind of Venn diagram, as I take it, Francesca, you were suggesting, that there's this kind of sweet spot between those two where AI and what's happening to labor today meet.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of contemporary literature responds to that condition. It's not just that you're working a crappy job, a 9 to 5. Who has a 9 to 5 job anymore? I mean, the whole platformification of everything means that you're never off the hook in some sense. You're always responding, always online. It's 24/7.
Real subsumption.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is where we quit, but we'll go into quitting later on, not just yet. No, I think another important point of, let's say, confliction between the, let's say, strand of bullshit jobs and the platform enshittification. Also, it's so difficult to say enshittification. It has so many vowels, so many syllables. I've read somewhere that the author proposed to use pooping instead of enshit or bullshit, just to kind of sweeten out, but we are not getting rid of the eschatological terminology for today's streaming. Now I just wanted to point on the subjective experience and the subjective dimension that for me exists both on the, let's say, bullshit job strand and enshittification of the platform strand, because while you were sort of pointing out that one has to do more with the platform and the other one has to do more with the job, there is a dimension of human perception of those dynamics. So one of the point of, let's say, defense of Graeber theory had to do with those jobs are not bullshit jobs objectively. They are bullshit jobs because people who are involved on those jobs, they don't give any meaning to those jobs. They cannot find any meaning on those jobs. And on a level, the reason why we are calling platform enshittified, or while I think those concepts are so resonating with us as an audience, even if they may not be like objectively always recognizable in reality, has to do with the subjective experience of experiencing a degradation in the use of the platforms. So I wanted to also point out this sort of parallel between those two concepts related to the subjective experience, which is also where the mental health dimension has a role and plays a role, because we all are somehow reacting to those dynamics and those impact our mental health.
And I think, yeah, I also tend to look at the subjective dimension for my formation and my background. And in this regard, I think it has to do really with the relationship between the worker and the work, or the worker and the job or the task, and how this sort of, which also means, in a way, it is the relationship between the person and society. At least I think it could be set at one level. And the point of, from what I remember from Graeber book, and also the book on bureaucracy, I tend to conflate the two for some reason, is that, okay, as you said, Nick, the use value is gone. So there's no use value, there's no meaning. What is there? So what is the function of this bullshit job? Because something that has no use value and no sign value, to stick with a certain jargon, then why does it exist? And I think this is where, you know, the personal relationship, the subjective relationship between the worker and the work has a political significance, or is part of a mechanism of power. So what I remember from the book, and actually from the presentation of the book on bureaucracy that I went to, it was at LSE quite a while ago, but Graeber was saying this, and I was like, I felt so understood, because it was saying the function of bureaucracy is mostly to make you feel stupid. And that's very true. Like when I have to fill a module, and even now as academic, we have to fill a lot of modules. If you work for the national health system, you have to fill a lot of module. You have to sort of keep track, to quantify. And I suppose the digitalization of the service industry and the digitalization in general has provided the affordances to really enforce that. When I do that, I am put in the position in which I feel like, okay, I may be wrong, I can be wrong, I will be wrong, and I will be persecuted for that. I will be told off. There is the very possibility of my limits, of my ignorance to be made objective. So I think it puts you like the bullshittification or edgetification or whatever, it puts you in this position of, yeah, maybe being diminished in a way. I don't know, do you remember that part of Greber, and how would you tackle the question, what is the function of bullshit job?
There was a line in Graeber's book that I really liked, and he said, I think he took it from Dostoevsky, and he said, think about being an inmate that goes and digs a hole every day and then fills it up by the end of the day and does so forever. And you're gonna feel like a wound in your soul, and there's nothing that hurts people so much than doing something utterly useless. But then, I mean, it's interesting because the context in which it was placed in this book was, what are we going to do now that technology supposedly takes care of our need, and therefore, hence what you said, like, what's the purpose of bullshit jobs if not to control society? But then the question of bureaucracy fits in there somehow, because the way in which such control has been produced, especially in care jobs or jobs that do still have a meaning, such as, again, education or the whole healthcare sector, it's been to bureaucratize them so much that by the end of the day, you feel like you're becoming a bureaucrat yourself. And what amazes me, for instance, is social work in the UK, social work in Italy, social work in Switzerland, where I lived for a very, very, very short time. But I was studying social workers because they quit in very big numbers. And they all, one of the reasons why they quit, I mean, it's funny because there was a journal in France that dedicated 2 issues to de facto social workers, and the professor that wrote the introduction says that social workers are not expecting to be paid. They've never been expected to be paid so much. So if they quit now, it's because the reality of their jobs has deteriorated so much that even with their expectations that were so low, they can't handle it anymore. And so it's not just pay, but it's that the purpose of what they do, which is actually to work at the margins of society with, migrant children or underage children or families, any social issues that require some type of care, that is bureaucratized so much that by the end of the day, you're constantly feeling modules, and that makes you feel, I'm not sure it makes you feel stupid, possibly so, definitely so.
No, that was more a subjective experience. It makes me feel stupid.
It's my subjective experience too, but it probably makes you feel like, oh, so you don't know what you're doing anymore.
Yeah.
So I remember like an article from a social worker that says, I don't know where I am, I don't know what I'm doing. And that, I think, is a point in people's life where it's not your job that loses its meaning, it's your life that loses its meaning. So that becomes quite a big issue, I think.
And Nick, I'm gonna turn the question to you, because I feel like I still haven't pictured fully the answer. What is the purpose of bullshit jobs? Who they serve? Or what is their role in the system?
So
Because one could say workers complain, they are less satisfied. Surely they're not more efficient. I mean, this is something that can be felt. Like, especially in the third sector, you know, the efficiency of at least in this country or also in Italy, the NHS or education or higher education has not improved since it is bureaucratized. So what is it for?
I'm tempted to say it's to further justify and entrench the status quo. So, when the level of productivity gains has diminished to near zero or whatever, there's a kind of an inertia that takes over. And that's part of, Graeber's critique of the ecstasy of rules, the bureaucracy that sort of replaces that early phase of entrepreneurial startup. It constitutes a kind of an inertial logic of its own. That means that it exists more as a structure that has to be filled. Let me give you an example, and this is cutting close to home. We have what are called open offer days for prospective students. Multiple times a year. Perhaps you've experienced these occasions?
Yeah.
On both sides.
We
both
feel you.
On the offer holder and
So with great fanfare, we welcome, sometimes in person, sometimes even more calamitously online, prospective candidates who may accept a place in the department to study. Those occasions, I think, without exception, in my experience, have not only been underwhelming, but they have actually not served any purpose whatsoever. If we can get the students to actually turn up when they commit to do so, that's one thing. But the other thing is there is an already established infrastructure for the open offer days, which, again, according to the inertial logic of the institution, must be met, must be filled in some way. So it's the filling of the space. And it
So
doesn't
it's
really matter
almost
what
a
happens.
recursive thing.
Yeah, I mean, so, you have a hit with pitching your degree to students, or you're a total dud. It doesn't really matter because the occasion is what had to happen. That's, that's
It's
the,
like
the
bullshit
definition
job
of the
serves
bullshit.
bullshit job. Like you have to tick that box. It's a box ticking exercise.
Exactly,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm organizing these.
But there's an ecstasy in box ticking. That's what we should
the
understand.
ecstasy. You
Yeah.
think there's an enjoyment.
I've done it again. Look, another thing ticked off. Fantastic. Little surge of dopamine. And I think there is that kind of cathextion with bureaucracy that happens that helps to, again, maintain that momentum, that sort of justification of a job that has no real purpose, no real meaning.
But if jobs are shittified or inherently crappy, and so they are made useless and meaningless and turn into this recursive box ticking exercise, who does the things that needs to be done?
Social workers, care workers, teachers, garbage collectors, all of the people who are doing essential work. Remember the pandemic when,
key workers.
the most of us got to stay at home, and the others who were deemed absolutely essential in the medical sector, of course, but also other key infrastructural positions. They're the ones who are doing the work that needs to be done. And yet,
But
of
we
course,
just said that also their work, also these kind of
exactly
jobs
so. So I was going
are-
to say, I mean, think about it. If you find that the idealist principle that drove you into a particular job, which is to help people, is not only not happening, but even worse, you suspect that you are contributing actively to the worsening of the situation through this job that is built on idealistic premises. That really does attack the soul, because it makes you intuit the complicity in institutional arrangements with not just maybe even the maintenance of the status quo, but its active increase in social inequality and the degradation of social environments. That, I think, is the real killer.
I think this is so evident also in the health sector. Like, as I was saying before we recorded the podcast, so I feel like I'm repeating myself, but just for you too, nobody else knows. I'm hanging out in the physiotherapy departments in hospital because I'm recovering from an injury, and basically you go to the NHS physio, and it's like 20 minutes of just exercise prescriptions. There's no hands-on work. There are no ultrasounds or other technique to help you recover, and you just have these 20-minute slots every 2 months. And of course this all goes down to I think this ideology more than reality of efficiency and funding cuts, so you have no time. So the quickest thing to do is to prescribe some exercise while you're typing, because if you have 20 minutes and you have one patient every 20 minutes for 9 hours in a day, you don't have time to touch the person. So you just type, and you have these people typing while telling you things, and then you're off. And then what happens is that it's unless you have the money to go private, it's much less likely that you actually recover. So you'll get arthritis or your sort of other things. And so it's sort of, I don't know, it seems to me that underneath this ideology of efficiency, there is not really, it's not efficient at all. And I suppose the same applies. My brother works in the mental health sector, and they have, in this country, they did unbelievable cuts. So you have all these people that are, he worked with suicidal people for a period of time, that at some point they don't have support whatsoever. And then, you will have all sort of, as a society, this is gonna cost you, in a way, it seems to me that it's not efficient, not even at an economic level. So again, my question, who would these benefits? Cecilia, what would you think?
I don't know, it's such a big, huge, monumental question.
I know, that's why I ask rather than
a way out could be like capitalism. I mean, but I think, the Keynes idea of the reduction of the working week to 15 hours, that should be somehow made possible by technology. We are very far away from that. So, and also there's always the idea that someone is getting rich. So if we think about the decay of platforms, we can think about the owners of those platforms in terms of maintaining the status quo, in terms of other types of, let's say, useless jobs, has to do to me with also the reduction of the space for desire and to do something else. So if you are endlessly tied to bureaucratic tasks, which are supposed to be important and that important that kind of overcome other purposes in jobs and in life, you have less time to dream, less time to hope, less time to imagine a revolution. And so I think there's something to be known about. When we were talking about the essential jobs during the pandemic, I think it's indicative that we didn't somehow flag the arts as an essential work, because we kind of lost those type of jobs, creative jobs, during the pandemic. But one may argue that those jobs were as essential as the care jobs, as essential as the healthcare sector. So where I'm going here, I really don't know, because I don't think there is really an answer.
Of course there is an answer, but I like that you brought to this
question. And also there is an ambiguity, because I don't think that bullshit jobs are 100% bullshit jobs at all. So each job has a component of useless and soul-seeking and destroying, but hopefully there is also something which is more meaningful, which ultimately keeps us alive, and this is why we are still in academia, I suppose, not to open these. I want to open the room to a potential sort of assembly, psychoanalysis, sharing session, if you want. So what was the question once again?
I think I like the fact that you brought in the question of desire.
Yeah.
Because I also feel like
we are trying to destroy the green screen.
Exactly, it's gonna just fall into us, and
we need to move forwards and not backwards.
Exactly, move forwards, not
backwards.
We
are so used to recede.
You can say just where you are. Nick, you were perfect. You were the only one really not causing any issues with our green screen. Yeah. But on
Second
the
by
screen
second.
it will look like cats meme are gonna fall into us. So perhaps it's also gonna be
Or
nice.
other memes.
Or other memes. Yeah. But the question of desire and how desire is co-opted or organized or institutionalized, and the ways I look at digital economies, I would like to focus a bit on what happened with the platformization of life, thus also of work. And the way I look at platforms, I study mostly dating apps and platform that remediates romantic or sexual desire and intimacy. It has to do a lot with hooking up the desire and the variability of desire. Like for me, the way I look at platforms are really these pro-aesthetic of desires, like the really infrastructures that support, cause, and enclose one's ability to desire. And that is also why they work. That is also why, yes, we critique them, but then, the moment we finish this, I'm gonna just quickly check my Instagram, because you never know. So, maybe, Francesca, because I know this is also one of your current strengths of study, or definitely is one of the things that you look at, and we are, after all, CDI TV, the Center for Digital Inquiry. So what is the role of the digital in the bullshittification, or when you look at the digitalization of work, what do you see? What are you looking at?
So I kind of like what Nick said earlier about box ticking, as I don't remember the exact words you used, but like something that we
ecstasy,
desire,
yeah.
the ecstasy of it. And I'm teaching about digital work to engineering students nowadays, strangely and oddly. But when I think about it, I try and think of it in terms of gamification of work, which is probably the most evil definition for some type of work, because it's bureaucratized, but at the same time, it's like a game. So you earn something it's like a video game. You tick these boxes, and then you're up to the second level, and you win something. You win a badge. You win. The fact that you win makes you not think about the fact that everyone is losing, because the moment you regulate work in such a way as your salary is not granted, but you have to tick boxes. I mean, thinking like simple digital work, like writers in essential labor, and it was the first type of job or Uber drivers that was constantly, you were monitored all the time, and you had to keep up certain performances, keep up certain indicators, else you would be punished, or actually you would not be winning that particular, you were not going to be among the best workers, and therefore lose your place in the ranking. And that's there's a certain sadism in organizing work like that, and even like academic work now is quantified by hundreds of indicators, and you have to rank among the top universities and scholars for you not to actually thrive, but actually to survive. And so it's publish or perish. Then it became publish, maybe perish. Then it became,
you can also publish and perish, which I think is the new, why to choose between one.
Exactly. Then it became publish and perish. You know what? We're restructuring, and then it became, AI can do your job, and that's been happening rather quickly. It's been making 20 years rankings, and then the fact that no one really wins, and then the thing about AI in creative work for me. It's really fascinating, because in a sense, someone said, I write in order to think, which is exactly at least which is what I do. This is why I'm so slow at writing, because it takes me a long time to think. But now there's a machine that thinks. It's not that it thinks, it just writes certain genealogies, but it's learning very quickly. And so if we as a collective body of society cannot think, and there's someone or something that thinks for us, whereas our life is becoming, basically we're externalizing part of the bullshit work to AI to keep competing in this constant re-ranking of our performances. That's quite evil. I mean, it's
Wow,
it's
this looks like a
ingenious.
sci-fi thing going back to
Horribly.
literature. Because I was thinking before when Cecilia was talking, I was thinking of Franco Berardi before, and the post-operaist tradition, and the whole immaterial labor and cognitorate, and the soul at work. So the idea that our very ability to think and feel is put at work. And now it looks like we don't even need that. Like, we don't even need your ability to think. Now your ability to think is not even exploited. It's just redundant.
I mean, this goes all the way back to one of the locus classicus texts on the destination of work, Marx's so-called fragment on the machines.
Oh yeah, the Grundrisse.
So prescient that he was able to intuit that at one point, with the continuing development of machinery, there would come a time when humans were, at best, mere appendages to the smooth functioning of the apparatus. And the interesting thing about that fragment, of course, is that it can be read in two different ways. It could be read as, on the one hand, great, we enter the post-work future that
Full automation.
that J.M. Keynes predicted for us in 1931. The great challenge of our time will be how to fill up our day, because we'll only need to spend at most 15 hours a week doing this. Well, that didn't really pan out
The best
for
is
reasons that I think Keynes should have known. But certainly the one interpretive line would be to welcome this development. See, we already have all the means to support the world's population in terms of essentials, and this would open up a vista of liberation for humanity. Of course, on the other side, you can see it as a deeply dystopic vision in which the machine dominates to the point where we are effectively machinic. The robotification of labor has, of course, been going on for a long time, century or more, but that tendency reaching its culmination in that vision is something that basically feeds the dystopian imagination of many a speculative fiction writer today. It takes so many different forms.
Would you tell me, would you give us an example?
Well, so a novel that I teach actually has to do with the question of work and its meaning. It's by Kazuo Ishiguro, Clara and the Sun,
Clara and the Sun.
which very much treats the question of emotional labor. So an emotionally sentient AI, or AF as Ishiguro calls her, an artificial friend, is introduced into a family to support this ailing teenager, and we gradually learn all the details behind her illness and the family history and pathology that has led to her being bought in the first place as an artificial companion, and eventually, Ishiguro, in that sort of masterful way that he has, very simply, but pulls the camera back so that we see that this future is one that's constituted by not just machinification of emotional labor, a la Arlie Hochschild or whatever, but also the complete degradation of the environment. And it's the understanding that that degradation is what has fed the momentum of AF development and its increasing incursion on what it means to be human that Ishiguro eventually gets to. So it's one example. You mentioned the whole dating app thing, and the way when I teach this novel to my students, they're all very much sort of attuned to the implications that are involved in this kind of blurring of lines between humans and AI when it comes to things that we took for granted relationships outside of, an online context.
We should keep on talking about that because we did a stream a couple of weeks ago, no, maybe it was a month ago, on artificial intimacies, so looking exactly at this idea. And it's true, I don't know, maybe because I am stupid also outside of bureaucracy, but I never thought about it, but it's in this term that it's actually this affective and relational and care labor that machines are doing. So when we think about machines doing the work for us, we think about task-oriented procedures and practices, but it's true, like most of the ways in which artificial intelligence is used is to get advice, is used as a friend, is used as a companion. Many young people use it as a therapist or as a sexual counselor. So there's a lot of this work of care.
All of which needs to be interpreted as the negative counterpart to the absence of, those provisions in our current social arrangements, right?
Before circling back to work, because at some points I think we do it. Now I wanted also to mention Pluribus, the TV series, the Apple TV series, which I think has an interesting similar sort of direction. I don't know if you watch it.
No.
So can I spoiler a little bit? So basically, there's
I don't know. I will pro or con spoiler. You do you.
Yeah, I'll be the party pooper once again and ruin everyone's enjoyment of the series. But basically, there is a virus infecting a lot of the human population. And one could say that most of the human population is turned into AI sort of beings. And to me, paradoxically, there's some sort of resemblance between, these creatures are somehow AI-like in the sense that they cannot do a lot of things autonomously unless they are instructed to do so. But also there's a clear, they engage in relationships with the still human beings, and somehow it kind of brings back onto the spotlight how much of the human experience we are now somehow externalizing to those technologies, let's say, in a sense that relationships between human and those type of new humans are become somehow normal, and then questioning how much humanity there is in those technologies. So to me it's interesting also how much of care work is externalized to those technologies.
It looks almost like I'm gonna say this and then I'm just gonna go and cry in the bathroom, but these machines are increasingly doing the work of being human.
Yeah.
So being human as a work, as a set of job tasks in themselves. Now, before
where do we go from here?
No. I thought about it. Look at this. Because I've been feeling like, okay, now really, what are we gonna do?
Windows don't open wide enough.
Yeah, exactly. Windows don't open. And you see why they haven't done the Windows wide opening. Yeah.
Let's not go there.
No, okay. So everything is terrible and we know it. But when we talk about power, I think it's also very much important to talk about resistance, right? Because I think the worst, this is my opinion, but the part of Marxism that, or a certain kind of Marxism that I never fully resonate with is is a certain vision whereby, yes, there's a lot of structure and there's very little space for agency, or for, quoting again Negri, the creative power of the multitude. Was it Virna or Negri? I don't remember. Anyhow, so because after all, people will be people, and yes, it could also be that at some point robots do the work of human and we end up, I don't know, running on a treadmill to power up the AI plants. I hope I'll be dead by then. But but it is also true that people react, that people find space, that people have fought, that people have earned rights, that people have made revolution. And so I think that this sense of, oh my God, we're doomed, is also part of what Mark Fisher would name capitalism realism. Like, we are here, look, four academics, and telling to another handful of academics how fucked we are. And our ecstasy is somehow to feel that at least we know, hey, we said it. So it reminds me of those memes whereby you eat chips while the world is crumbling. So to try and sort of get out of this uncomfortable comfort zone in which we left-wing intellectuals very easily end up in, what are the strategies of resistance? What are the strategies of disobedience? How are workers reacting, relating, responding to the deterioration of work, whether in the digital or otherwise? And I'm going to take some crisps. So. Whoever.
I mean, it's complicated because now we're talking about an attack that is coming from really every side right now, and so similarly, I guess there's strategies. I guess again, I'm influenced by the fact that last night I went to this presentation of Quinn Slobodian's a new book called Masochism that looks at AI basically as a new mode of production, and I can't help but think that this more mode of production has as its goal to delete humans. And delete humans meaning in a very social Darwinist way, and therefore humanity, the work of being human, but also the cost of human reproduction, and empathy and everything that goes with becoming human. So if this is the goal, I think nevertheless that they, when I say they, I say, well, let's think about the big tech oligarchy, so to speak. They really must have a hard time with humans constantly being hard to rule to some extent, because now we're looking at Trump's second term and second year in his second term, and it kind of really looks dark, but there have been changes, so many changes over the past, even simply 10 years. I'm thinking George Floyd's killing, and the response to it brought to the streets 26 million people. It was an interracial convergence, even the drive for equality from the feminist sector. And if we look at labor, the idea of the short working week, which is also historical, because if we look at it historically, the working week has been sort of becoming smaller. The German chancellor has a whole campaign now against the work-life balance culture. He wants a longer working day, up to 12 hours working day. That's cool. Which makes me think that we must be doing something right. At the same time, like the gig economy, the ability of poor workers to organize, and in Italy there's a factory used to be owned by a British investment fund called Melrose. It's a factory in the automotive sector. It shut down 4.5 years ago, fired 450 people with an email. But since 500 workers have been permanent assembly, it's quite a unique case. Obviously, many have gone because they needed a salary for their families. They've been without any income basically for even 13 months in a row. But it's been a permanent assembly of now 4.5. Actually, 4 years and 9 months, because the 5th year will be on the 9th of July, because the 9th of July 2026 will be 5 years since they were fired on 9th of July 2021. And therefore, I think, and the funny thing is that they've been able to organize not only their own former workplace, but the entire region, if not a big part of the country, because even dock workers, I mean, obviously there's interlocking struggles, and therefore dock workers that blocked shipments of weapons from actually occurring in Italy. Italy is a very reactionary country, but nevertheless, these alliances produce slight shifts in our understanding of what is possible, I think. And therefore, at times, I remember after the two big strikes in September and October against the genocide in Palestine, someone tweeted in Italy, we're watching a pre-revolutionary moment. And I was thinking, wow, we went from being a country that hardly had any protest in like 10 years to being on the edge of a pre-revolutionary moment. But it did feel right at that particular time. Just like maybe in Greece, at the time of the memorandum, when millions of people took to the streets, it might have felt right. So I think these times are really, really rapidly shifting. And so what's possible is really, we don't know, but possibly everything is possible, even a change in the course of history.
I would say, that example of the GKN factory self-organizing has a lot of resonance in this country, because it echoes what happened here over 50 years ago with the Lucas Plan, where a former aerospace company, which had been making weapons, including weapons that were involved in the prosecution of the war in Vietnam, turned the factory over to something that was genuinely socially useful. That was the whole point of the Lucas Plan, was that workers would take over this existing space and turn it to something radically different. It's the meaning giving that move promotes that was so important for that Lucas moment. I've often thought, what would any organization do if the workers who were involved in it instituted their own Lucas Plan? What would this university look like? How would it be different? It might not be different in every particular. We might inherit, congenial spaces like this one, but we would be devoting our energies in radically different ratios and to different purposes than the ecstasy of rules that currently dominates. And so I think it's really important to know that there is a potential for resistance in every, even non-revolutionary seeming situation, because of the degree of repression and of imposition that's involved. So another example that came to mind when you mentioned work-life balance. So there's this company, Artisan, in San Francisco. A couple of years ago, they started putting up posters. Stop hiring humans, because their USP was, we have AI workers for you. Stop hiring humans. And then another one was, AI workers don't care about work-life balance. As you can imagine, this had quite a response on the streets of San Francisco, despite the fact that, of course, it was the hub of the AI industry, Silicon Valley's home turf. Those posters were ripped down. They were torched everywhere. It was, unfortunately, a wonderful PR coup on the part of Artisan, because they got the attention that they needed. So I think we have to be smart about resistance. We can't just assume, when a trolling company, dangles our superfluous status in front of us, that, just sort of fighting back against the signs is enough. It requires organization. It requires active and forward thinking about how you might implement a different order. And that is the task that awaits us.
Thinking of strategies of resistance or reactions, both Francesca and Cecilia have looked into quitting, the phenomenon of quitting. a movement of quitting. Sometimes in the public press has been framed as a social, almost a social or political movement. We can look at it as a mood or as an existential even reaction. So Cecilia, would you say that quitting, you've looked at quitting in the creative industries, can be framed as a strategy or tactics of resistance? Or is it a giving up?
Well, I think it depends on the point of view, basically. I mean, as
Fair enough.
people, now I was distracted because I was thinking, I have to say this because so it goes out of my mind.
Yes,
talking about
it's
like
a safe space.
yes, strategy of resistance. I was thinking about Minneapolis and what happened after the IC occupation, because I think in terms of like agency, organization and such, I think that demonstrated that there's some kind of points, tipping points, where people, even if they don't allow something to happen, so they like street level kind of normal people organization that happened in Minneapolis sort of showed how where like humanities can at some point get together and say, oh, that's enough, no more than this. So I felt some sort of reassurance in that. I have a friend who lives there, who teaches there. It kind of gave me a map of the everyday sort of tactics of resistance, which was not part of not always part of a political organized resistance, which also has to do with the quitting. So able to kind of connect stuff, because the way in which I kind of looked at quitting was not a sort of organized strategy, in the sense that I've looked at some like cultural workers who at some point decide to not trying anymore. One of the imperatives of creative work can be somehow summed up in keep doing, keep trying, and I've looked at some people who said, all right, I don't want to do it anymore, and I think that's...
Well, it is resisting an imperative,
It
no?
is. It's resisting an imperative and also gaining back some sort of paradoxical agency. So it's not the way, obviously, the way in which I see it. By actually researching on this, by developing a discourse on it, obviously is not giving up, is a tactic of it's not even a tactic, it's an example, an attempt to regain some sort of agency. It's a non-political act of resistance, because those people, they are not part, I don't know how to say that in English, GKN, because in Italian would be GKN, so my brain is doing weird things. It has a sort of political mobilization lineage related to the history of the working class, to the history of Italy, to the history of that specific region within the history of Italian working class. While when we work at the creative workers, they don't always, or they don't even have that type of lineage. So it's more spontaneous, it's more not related to any, let's say, socio-political awareness. They don't have an awareness of class, because they are always
They're not part of a
middle
union,
class
this sort of
and
thing.
so on. But there is something at the bottom that ties all this type of resistance together, is the attempt of having a say in the meanings of their own lives, circling back to the idea of opposing bullshit jobs. So yeah, I think that the point there in quitting is some sort of an attempt of regaining a sort of agency and a sort of the people's own humanities in their living condition, which are also working to condition. I don't know if this makes sense.
Yeah, also liberating the desire, going back to what you were saying before. And I'm also thinking of a stream that we did with Alessandro Gandini that Francesca and Cecilia knows about digital detox. So, and how there is I don't know if it is a non-political form of resistance or a political mood rather than a political action. I still feel that the world is crumbling upon us. The sky is falling. So yeah, a political mood or a non-political action. Can you stay still?
It's
mind.
just
Or maybe you move once for all, you know, you just move and
It's not
reset.
it's not
Yeah.
touching the thing yet.
Io lo vedo muovere, I
No, no.
see it moving. Okay, maybe it's me.
Okay.
Maybe it's me being pessimistic. But yes, this opting out or quitting as a mood, as an action, or at the very least, maybe as a way to disentangle one's desire. Like if I'm not within that, if I put myself out of that mechanism of try again, fail better kind of thing, this whole entrepreneurial sort of
cruel
Californian
optimism.
ideology thing or self-optimization thing, then at least, I don't know, maybe I can go and do pottery, or I can dance, or I can take some psychedelic, like I can do something else, I can have sex. And I suppose the same applies when it comes to platforms. Like if I'm not there, like looking if someone liked something of what I posted, then maybe I can just simply do something else or desiring something else. While I get you saying whatever you think about this, I would also like to kind of open up the debate, as I'm curious to hear from the people in the room and also the people on the internet. Michael,
There's some questions in chat.
do you want to come here so that the mic could?
Is that already mic?
No.
Yeah, no, there are these mic, but you can. Do you want to just sit
I don't
down?
really want
Down. Do it. You cannot say no as the co-founder of CDI TV.
Yeah, I had two questions, and then there's also two sitting in the chat.
Do you have also some answers, please?
I don't think so. Maybe I have. I might have interesting questions, but I can't promise that either. First is whether. So obviously AI we've been talking about in a very using the generic term, and whether it makes a difference if we start talking more specifically about particular technologies and how they've been deployed, instantiated. I wonder whether does something like local AI, does it make a difference for labor and work and politics and organization or not, in your view? And then related to this, I think that there's some comments that have been made about automation, sort of extreme alienation, if not dehumanization. But I wonder about it as like AI, let's say large language models, generative AI as a technical form. Is it useful to also look at it as a technical form in order to understand its relations to, the social relations that are connected to it? So, for example, if we think of how generative AI is predictive, but it's sort of predictive of the past. It's norm-seeking, but it's dynamic. But it's certainly involved in normalization of some kind. When we're making statements like bullshit jobs are, a job that is immersed in, or it's in real subsumption. We've moved into these conditions of real subsumption. How does that relate to these aspects of, let's say, generative AI as a technical form? I mean, maybe that's not a super clear question, but I'm like, well, can we think of AI in terms of exchange values, social relations, when we look at those kind of like, something like high dimensional space, vectors, prediction? And does that help us understand something about it in terms of the politics that might be able to evolve around this technical form? It's probably too complicated.
I'll just put my
but that's
cards
what
on
I'm
the
thinking
table.
of. But
Yeah.
because I think so far we've been speaking in very general terms about AI. But is it possible? Like, have either of you sort of thought about what the actual technology is doing, and use that as also another lens through which we could start to think about labor and politics and work. That's an easier way of framing it.
I mean, I'm just going to go hard on this because I have been increasingly frustrated by the credulity and the resignation in the face of what seems to me an act of enclosure on the scale of the historical enclosures. That is, the degree to which the commons has been seized, which is the basic foundation for these models, the large language models. In a way, AI is the replacement of oil. It is that new thing that will, supposedly new thing, that will supply the infrastructural currency for a world order in which an increasingly tiny percentage of people call the shots. You know, the platformification is really, I mean, I think it is ultimately a question of power, not economy, and not certainly social usefulness. It's the degree to which power can be concentrated in the hands of a very few multi-billionaires aiming towards trillionaires in Silicon Valley, and the way in that has presented itself as a land grab, as it were. It's our data, right? It's the data of the historical legacy of knowledge production over centuries that is effectively feeding these models. So we need to connect that phenomenon not just with the degradation of labor as such, but also with the degradation of the environment, which always gets a second at best mention in terms of the overall impact of this technology, to again constitute what I think Ishiguro was getting at in his novel, which is this is an environmental disaster, but it's an environmental disaster that is at the same time a social disaster and an environmentally unjust disaster. So I'm not addressing you at the level of the techniques of the way in which these models are built, because I think that's part of their point. You know, black box algorithms, you know, that the engineers themselves don't necessarily know how they work. They have sophisticated ideas and understandings of the way that they work, but they don't actually have explanations for the way that they produce the results that they do. That kind of seeding of power and agency, even beyond the level of those who are supposedly in the driver's seat here, is, to me, a kind of existential threat. I don't understand why everybody doesn't grasp that. It seems to me just...
Does it make any difference if I download an open model and run it at home and it's not on a platform? Does that make a difference for you?
No, because it's like not you being a non-smoker in a room full of smokers. You're still inhaling that bad air. And even if those of us who opt out entirely, which I don't think is actually possible, are still, of course, surrounded and closed by a model that vampirically bleeds us. You know, it's a two-way street. That's what I have to keep telling my students. You think, oh, just, you know, using an LLM like ChatGPT is pouring out a bottle of water at worst. But no, you're actually feeding the thing that is going to have an incalculable impact on your future, not to mention the present landscape of labor.
Do you use any AI?
I myself do not, but I teach it, so I have to understand, you know, how it's used by others, and also a little bit of a very little bit of the technicality. But of course, I'm just coming from. I'm just in an English department. We don't count.
Can I play devil's advocate and keep going?
Of course.
So, one of the etymologies of reading is to advise, and we've established that a lot of people use large language models as an advisor. Surely we can agree they're inscription machines in a kind of Derridian way or a Stiglerian way. And being human is always to externalize. So I'm just wondering, you know, is there nothing in the technical form that can be removed from things like platformization or like disembedded, or do you see it like inherently like connected?
I'm not and I'll shut up after this. I'm not an anti-technologist as such, because there's a long and varied history of revolutionary left proposals for the use of technology. Think about Cybersyn in Chile in the early 1970s under Allende, and many another have drawn on the potential of this technology for genuine social liberation. So I'm in no way, pretending that this is one and uniform thing, which it is not. It is not just a tool. All of these things that tend to get floated. But I do think that in its current form, under the current conditions under which it's developed, it is an instrument of mass death. I mean, quite literally, of course, in the way that current wars are being prosecuted, but in the longer term as well.
I agree.
Cecilia?
No, or were you say something from behind the camera? No, I think we need time. We may not have time, not today, but like in general, as a human creature, to process some of these issues. Because I feel like these AI language learning models, they arrived all together, all the same, for those of us who were not into the technologies. And they arrived in a very platformized, extractionist ways. It's not the same way as the internet arrived, because the internet arrived as somehow a subculture, as somehow a place of resistance, rather as a place of commercialization initially. So while those models, they arrived already as a forms of exploitation, as a form of destruction of the planet. So to go back to that place where you were somehow playing the devil's advocate a little bit, would you want an AI which is not owned by a capitalist corporation, which is not destroying the planet, which is somehow something that I can own, I can build? Perhaps yes, but for the way in which we have received those technologies, I think we are not there yet as an understanding of those, as a possibility. So I would say perhaps yes, perhaps in the future that would be a very, I would say, partially welcome development for the future, if I can use AI and I know that it's not wasting water, is not destroying data. Is there any space for that type of future? Because if there is, perhaps I would happy to inhabit that future and to use that technology, if that's what you were kind of pointing at.
Well, I think like non-extractive futures is something we should all be thinking about, but that's not exclusive to AI.
Yeah, of
Definitely.
course.
You know,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
when
yeah.
you say the
good
current conditions that we're in, then I agree, but then we're talking about many things. So I just wonder what the role of the technology could be within the bigger picture, or whether you see it as fundamentally subsumed into those conditions.
Can I just a time? I mean, last year, actually maybe in 2023, Ireland consumed more energy for data centers rather than warming of every house in the island. And so I think when it comes to AI and technology nowadays, with the inequalities that we're looking at, inevitably it will be a class project. I mean,
Yes.
almost inevitably. And sometimes I just find myself wondering in what other questions humanity could have invested had we not been so unequal. And so looking even at the class of oligarchs that's ruling now, I really think the question of psychoanalysis that obviously emerged more than 100 years ago, but still really at the beginning of its history, we really don't know anything about humanity quite yet. But we don't even care. I mean, all we care about is becoming more efficient, but we don't care. For instance, what kind of trauma have they undergone? Not that I really care about, because it's their business and they should take care of it before even, start ruling society or dreaming of it. But what I think I'm trying to say is that I'm not sure, had research not been driven by a ruling class, that we would have invested on the same questions. and I wish we could figure out in a very collective way what are the questions that humanity wants to invest on. So,
Yeah.
Can I, the occasion, Manuela, can I invite you here? Yes. I would like to hear from, sorry, no, the beanbags are the price to pay. They're the ritual of passage. Yes.
okay.
Just how would you respond to everything that has been said? And perhaps you can also say something about your research, because you look into work.
Yeah. I look into
You
work.
look into unions also, no?
Yeah, exactly. How they have, how work and capital actually have negotiated their space in the world and in developed economies in particular. But yeah, I'm very glad that you said that, like very like non-compromising, I guess, final judgment on AI, because I'm also very pessimistic. I don't think it came all of a sudden. I think that there were like at the beginning projects that were like the internet. So Joy Bolawimi, in her memoir, she writes about how actually she was hoping to, she did do projects on helping Haitians who were displaced because of a hurricane, like recovering. So there are ways in which you could mobilize that technology to do good things, and perhaps at the beginning it was very empowering to think that you could do that. It's amazing, but it was quickly grabbed and owned and exploited by tech corporations. They wouldn't let that happen, and they managed to really capture every space of freedom and monetize on it. And this is what I think that when you were asking whom are these bullshit jobs serving? Well, they're feeding a machine with data, and very good data, very clean data. So it is like a completely bullshit job to feed in spreadsheets all the time.
Bullshittification and datafication are
Yeah.
quite related.
And it feeds into each other, and those data are oil, are like gold for these companies. So I think that they feed into that. But perhaps what I wanted to maybe bring in from the lessons from the organized labor, collective labor over time, is how the financialization of the economy actually like silenced any potential for answer. And I don't want to like sound too pessimistic, but I don't think there's a way out at the moment, like that makes a difference. Okay, it can make a difference to us individually, and perhaps locally at best, community level, great, but that's as far as my optimism can go. But I like the idea that we were talking also about care work and about the real work that happens, and how that was somehow affected also by a lot of bureaucratization and detached it from the original meaning of it, because it reminded me of like what's happening in the UK, and one of the case studies that I've been looking at is how financialization came into care work as well. So with equities, and they're buying care homes, and they, if you read their reports and their business plans and strategies, they really make a point that they go into like organizations where you have large migrant female low-paid workers, because they are non-unionized, and they can even more quickly make money out of this financialization of a sector that will continue to exist, will continue to need workers, but whether it's bureaucratized or whether it's just simplified, it will require workers. But the value of this work, which is immense and it's growing, the projections are big because of the aging of the population, will not be given or shared with the workers. It will just be retained and multiplied with lies, lots of lies that belongs to the financial realm. So lies, truth, and bullshit in between, those lies are really feeding, I think, the only growth that we see in some economies. And that's the end. Really positive, but I think I'm really worried about the AI thing. I also I'm not like a good technology person, but I also teach it. I also try to bring it in, and and I.
So Manuela, do you mind staying there, and then I throw at you a couple of questions from the chat?
Or if there's
Which I try to read without glasses.
anyone in person also? No.
They're
Yeah.
a bit heavy.
Yeah, they're heavy.
Yeah.
They're like one.
Just what you need at this
Yeah, that's what we need. Yeah. We can do strength. We can do yoga. We were talking about yoga before. So I'm gonna synthesize and maybe simplify a question, which is why the abolition of work, the demand for the abolition of work, seem to have become less present now.
Present.
Less. Why does the demand for the abolition of work seem less present in our political movements today than in the past? How do we get our politics out of what Joshua Clover called the affirmation trap? How do we get our politics out of the affirmation trap?
I guess there's a moral question in here somehow. Work has been defined at what makes you worthy as a person. The affirmation trap was the so I don't know exactly what that means, but I'm guessing that for you to have social personal worth, you have to prove it through work, and there's a moral twist in almost every sector nowadays. I mean, the social collapse is pretty much a moral collapse, and even the idea of quitting. And I liked Carolina's question earlier as to whether it's giving up or a form of protest. But it's been such a controversial point in my experience. But that going back to the Grundriss and the fragment on the machine sometimes seems like pure utopia, because work has become normal. And if you remind yourself and society that if we quit, if we work less, the earth would benefit from it, we as a society would benefit from it. Many people would be surprised, because that's not the way in which the conversation's been going. But that's gaslighting or moral manipulation. And I think there comes a point where we need to figure out that we need to slow down for climate change. We need to work less, not more. We need to rethink what we do. We need more jobs in care, education, social reproduction, and less so in the private sector. So I'm not sure this answers the questions, and it's going to be a hard time as we move forward, because all this shift towards a 12-hour day work day, it seems to me like it's happening, and so we will be divided in a society that works all the time and then is unemployed and is starving, and that's dysfunctional, to say the very least. And so we need to work on that question, for sure.
And a question from the chat that is related to that is, how about the question or the topic, the demand for workers' control? And Craig Gant, ciao Craig, from the chat, say, and I apologize in advance if I'm not rephrasing correctly, that this question of the workers' control has been absent from unions since quite a long time. Perhaps, Manuela, you can tackle this question.
Yeah, there's a lot of literature. It is true, it's been absent, and it has kind of contributed to the dying call for a post-work society, definitely. There's a lot of literature on defensive collective bargaining that took place particularly since the 90s, so to defend what had been conquered, but nothing like a bit more, demanding or creative. So it's entrenched in protecting the few, yeah, labor protections, affordances that have been conquered until then, and then, yeah, the union itself. I mean, especially the mainstream unions, they haven't been able to articulate different demands. They've been negotiating in a very, very limited space, and that's not by chance that the GKN, for example, doesn't have real traditional unions involved. It was much more grassroots and absolutely. So yeah, I think unions have contributed to crystallized a certain privilege that they had managed to get, but then from a certain point onwards, knowingly, they had to retrench to a very defensive type of bargaining, and that meant that, even where it's left, it's considered a lot. Even here in our university, we defend it, but we can see how weakened it is.
I like this porous stage. So but you want to say something, so you go on. In the meantime, I thank Manuela and I invite Joel on the stage.
We can also.
I was just going to say that I associate this whole withering of the post-work demand with a kind of cyclical movement which reached its previous high point around 2012, as I remember. So that was when Kathy Weeks's book on the problem of work came out. It was also a kind of high tide of unemployment in the wake of the great financial crisis. And what was interesting about that moment wasn't just that people were suddenly waking up and saying, you know what, I'm unemployed, I can't, I'm not getting anywhere. What if I didn't have to have that degree of permanent employment in my life? Now that's in itself kind of privileged and advantaged position, but it seemed to respond to earlier moments and waves of post-work imaginaries. And I think particularly that, if I'm going to make a pitch for my own weak discipline, the idea of science fictional imagining otherwise with respect to not just work, but also environment, and indeed the entire question of social arrangements and the relations between humans and the rest of nature, that's an important moment that needs reviving. Those early 1970s and late 1960s scenarios that constitute the classic second wave of science fiction, the new wave, those works, I think, speak to us now because we're realizing how much of their potential went unfulfilled and how much of the imagination that went into them has been suppressed in the intervening years.
I guess I don't have a question. I just want to say that sort of like the environment that you were drafting in this conversation, it's really a realization of like this post-authentic society, that like this paradigm that we now live in. It doesn't seem to me like you spoke about post-truth and bullshit jobs in On Bullshit by Ari Frankfurter, and it's this whole mishmash that something is not false or true, right? Politicians don't lie the old way before. They just don't lie to you, to your face. They feed you bullshit. They say, well, it could be this, but it could also be that. And something can be very big and be very small. And Iran can be totally defeated, but it can also be very dangerous at the same time, right? So your sense of reality is sort of, everything is untethered, right? And all this resistance to categorization, it's going into all territories of our life, right? So in our jobs, we are not really sure of if there's a question of value or not. In art, we also don't really have a distinction between low art and high art. Everything is becoming this sort of mishmash. Everything is coming to the middle. Slop, exactly. But I mean, in a sense, there also was an ideology of authenticity, and I think that sometimes in your conversation you sort of verge to often more ideological statements, so things that don't actually question their own problematic. Because, you know, work is a social pattern,
Absolutely.
okay, that sort of by, I don't know, by what means, can almost be by chance or by, you know, provenance, but it sort of became this pattern of our societies. Just like money, I mean, and we have fiat money, and work is also some sort of, has a power of its own. So I just, my question was that, like, this sort of bullshittification of jobs is just one symptom of all this sloppification, everything becoming sort of, there's no really objectives anymore. There's no really a point of view or somewhere where you focus on. Everything is, you know, McLuhan would say that everything is more acoustic. You don't really know exactly where you are and where things come from. I mean, I also wanted to say that even before, right, in this more authentic age, people also felt sort of worthless in their jobs. I mean, Simone Weil, she chronicles her time at the factory in Citroën, right, and where she felt completely meaningless, right, because she was doing machinic work, right. There's like also the famous scene of Charlie Chaplin in Modern Times, I think. I mean, I think this is a question that has prolonged. It's not just something of now, right? We feel that emptiness ever since modernity, or even before.
What do you say, Francesca?
I agree. For me, it's not a stream if you don't bring in your perspective and quote McLuhan and Simone Weil. So I feel already better. And perhaps I want to get another question from. No, stay.
Oh.
If you want.
No, you
Yeah.
stay.
No, she's just gonna speak at the microphone.
These are the genre of questions that are
I
more
need- I need to
interesting
stay.
us.
Whichever you prefer. So if we can just take your question and then maybe a round of responses, and then we go to drink and cry.
No, it's cry revolution and resistance.
Thank you a lot.
Do you mind speaking there? Just because you know our global audience with
course.
millions of people, we know what kind of
Of
power.
course. Yes, thank you a lot. So, you know, something that I've been thinking a lot, and maybe I wish I had sort of more emphasis on, is the very idea of, you know, what work and labor counts has changed. And I was really thinking about feminists in the 70s and, you know, trying to recognize this work at home, this second shift as work, right? So one aspect, but actually, like something that I've been thinking a lot, you know, during your presentation, especially in the corporate work, and I feel there is a certain aesthetics associated with certain jobs, especially on social media. And you know, my question will be, do you think, you know, that's one of the reasons why maybe it's so difficult to resist, because it's almost like a lifestyle. And you know, I just remembered a couple of videos that came up on my feed. One was, you know, sort of a day in a life of a corporate person and what I apply from my work to my personal life, sort of the tips and tricks. And like, it's very funny, like algorithm immediately recommended another video. It's like corporate life depressed. But all of that, you know, it sort of suggests aesthetics. It's not just you make content out of it, it's like, it's almost who you are, right? It's very difficult to step out of it and say, maybe I'm disinterested, you know, or maybe I just do what I have to do almost, right? I have to earn money, and that's what I am here, but sort of outside it, I have my own hobbies that I don't try to, you know, monetize in any way, or I don't try to do them super effectively, because I feel there is this trend as well, like, you know, a perfect routine to become something. So which almost feels like your personal life is jobified. It's like really difficult, you know, to talk about resistance, because where is that space for resistance? So I'm sort of like a multi-layered question. I just wonder about, what are your thoughts? And, from a young person as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. You see, now do you miss me asking questions? Huh? It's true, right? Now you miss my very simple, dumb question. I know. That's why I stepped out, just to be missed. But I would ask you just a round of whatever you want to say, also in response to our questions / comments, as we love to say. But yeah, contribution basically, and and then, as I said, we can go drink and cry.
No, I just want to say to the people who are still here and online, thank you for staying, because this is a very informal setting.
It's a little of a marathon.
But it's a very long setting. Also, thank you, Keith, for staying and making all of this possible. Super interesting what you are throwing in, because we talk about digital platform in the sense of, in a certain sense, but what you are bringing in has to do with representation of the work itself on digital platforms, and all that strand of narrations of self-improvement video 9 to 5, like the 5 to 9 routine between my 9 to 5, or the girl boss thing. I mean, there's quite a lot of imaginaries being produced, quite a lot of free or not free work being done to somehow glorify even more a certain type of corporate identity. So I don't know if, to just wrapping and close now a little, I don't know if in 2026 Graeber would receive so much personal testimonies about bullshit jobs being useless, because I think that you are right, there is a sort of conservative waves, so we can think about the tradwives phenomenon as a conservative waves example, and that tackles with the feminist the feminist strand you were mentioning, but as well this whole glorification of work identity, especially on female, because probably the men, they have the bro kind of gym bro type of thing as a representation, but on the women's side there's also this corporate girly skincare routinified type of thing that for sure kills a lot of spaces of resistance. If I could sleep instead of doing my 5 steps routine, if I could dream instead of going to the gym at 6 a.m. as it is portrayed quite often on social media, probably there will be more and more space for new imaginaries, desire and revolution, and in this sense platforms are oppressing us in an extractionist way, but also in our mind, desires and future. So thank you for bringing that up, because it really resonated and sort of clicked for me. So yeah, that's my closing thing. Anyone?
So I'm just going to share my obsession.
Cats? Felines?
Because your question, you started with gender, and it's pretty much my obsession nowadays, because I'm thinking if we take AI seriously and we take this as a new mode of production, and we take inequalities as the structure wherein this transformation happens, and if we think that a new mode of production restructures society, that's what's the place of women inside of it. And I guess I might be influenced by the Epstein files, I might be influenced by Melinda Cooper's fantastic piece on Epstein family values. But what I'm trying to say is, how are people gonna survive in a world where work, let's say, disappears and no basic income is given? And I'm thinking that Epstein has something to say about the role that the oligarchs would want women to find themselves in. And there's this thread why, well, like there's this tradition that is clearly coming back, but it's not just traditions, really something that has one foot in the future, one foot in the medieval times, and they somehow they coexist. And this is my obsession. I think trying to figure out what kind of society they want is quite important today. Also to figure out what kind of class we want. Because when we talk about the working class, at least in Italy, we think about the white, heterosexual, male, industrial working class. And it seems as though women, queer people, queer community, migrants, may ask to be included, but they're not. And whereas I think that thinking about how this phases restructuring society can also help us see the key role that race and gender have in restructuring class, and make us think about these subjects as key in the revolution to come, I guess. Let's be hopeful.
Thank you, Francesca.
I mean, I resonate with that question as well, because it seems to speak to the problem with work, which is that it fulfills many needs, not just the needs to put food on the table and to support your family financially, but of course to constitute a way of socially being. And without that, what would we be reduced to? So I find the transition, and I was sort of struck by your almost mourning the old alienated job, that you could, what was good about that was that it was alienating. You could leave it. There was detachment involved. The 9 to 5, compartmentalized. Now, and I saw this
Severance.
Yeah, completely. So early in my misadvised life trajectory, I was working a 9 to 5 at a consulting company, just as a desktop publisher type person, to support my theater habit, which I regard as essential work and still do, creative work. But I found that something strange was happening in that workspace. It's not just because it was a consulting company and they were peddling, sort of the equivalent of drugs to other companies. But it was also because it manifested a shift in managerial philosophy, which was do away with the divide between work and home, incorporate workers into a kind of extended sense of family. People were not just socializing after work, they were sitting on beanbags like this one in the middle of the working day and hanging out.
Which is
and
what
having
we're doing.
conversations. And it was a way of sort of putting the grips on workers, and much more sort of in the BIFO style, solo work kind of thing, but addressing specifically the need for a kind of sociality that was not being answered elsewhere. And so that porousness of the line between work and non-work seemed to suggest something really crucial about what was happening in the world of work.
And speaking about the fine line between work and non-work, because in a way or another, let me show myself. You work, can I?
You work.
Yeah, in the middle. Talking about work and life and work-life balance. It's 6:30, so we are 1 hour and a half late on our 9 to 5. Today, my colleague and friend Chris Milton, with whom we do the podcast, Media Whatever, Spotify, told me, you're very good at not working. So now, finally, that's my moment to shine. And it's the moment in which I say, okay, and now let's go to not work. Also, intellectual work is work. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Carolina. Thank you to our guests. Thank you for those who resisted till the end. And thank you, Chris. Yeah, Keith, for helping.
Also, thank you, Chris.
And to
Ciao.
Bye.